What's your reaction to it?
I mean, I think all of the criticism is valid because, Democrats stand on this moral high ground all the time. And, they act so self-righteous. The reality is he didn't have to say anything in regards to, whether or not, his son wanted to be pardoned. He could have said, hey, man, I'm not focused on that right now. But since they were calling Trump a threat to democracy and they were saying that, nobody's above the law, but they were speaking about him, that's what they were running on. So when he kept saying things like, nobody's above the law, I respect, the jury's decision in regards to my son, he didn't believe that. But he didn't have to volunteer.
Charlamagne ignited intense controversy after delivering a bold critique aimed at both The View and the Democratic Party, accusing them of deep hypocrisy. At the heart of the uproar was President Joe Biden's decision to pardon his son, Hunter Biden. A move Charlamagne claimed completely undercut the moral high ground Democrats often assert. While the party frequently champions itself as a defender of law and order, Charlamagne argued that this decision, along with previous actions, exposed a troubling double standard. In this video, we break down Charlamagne's fiery comments, the sharp pushback from The View, and what it all could mean for the Democratic Party's credibility moving forward.
As usual, I agree with my brother Charlamagne. So it's one thing to do the wrong thing. It's another thing to be self-righteous about it. And that's what's really annoying and gets under people's skin, right? So Joe Biden said 1,000 times, no one's above the law. No one's above the law. And then on his way out, after he loses the election, or his party does, he's like, well, no one other than my family members. We're obviously above the law, you know what I'm saying? It's because they didn't expect to lose the election. And he was saying no one's above the law as a political gimmick against Donald Trump. Never meant it in the first place. Whoopi's not telling the truth. We showed her clip earlier in the show where she says, well, Joe Biden has good intent. How the hell do you know that? Doesn't look like he has good intent at all. And what Charlamagne is doing and why we love it is because he's now broken out of the mainstream media. He's in radio originally, right? It's core part of mainstream media. But he's breaking the mold and say, I'm done with this, right? So you keep telling us they have great intent and they're going to keep on delivering.
What's your reaction to it?
I mean, I think all of the criticism is valid because, Democrats stand on this moral high ground all the time. And, they act so self-righteous. The reality is he didn't have to say anything in regards to, whether or not, his son wanted to be pardoned. He could have said, hey, man, I'm not focused on that right now. But since they were calling Trump a threat to democracy and they were saying that, nobody's above the law, but they were speaking about him, that's what they were running on. So when he kept saying things like, nobody's above the law, I respect, the jury's decision in regards to my son, he didn't believe that. But he didn't have to volunteer that lie to begin with.
I'm going to stop you for a second.
Uh-oh.
Only because you don't know that it was a lie. We don't know why he changed his mind.
You really think he just changed his mind over Thanksgiving weekend all of a sudden?
No, I'm going to tell you what I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I think he changed his mind because he got sick of watching everybody else get over.
The Democratic Party often portrays itself as the moral backbone of American politics, a defender of justice, fairness, and accountability. But as Charlamagne Tha God and commentators like Anna Kasparian and Cenk Wagua from the Young Turks have pointed out, that moral high ground often crumbles under scrutiny. A glaring example is President Joe Biden's decision to pardon his son, Hunter Biden, despite years of publicly declaring that no one is above the law. The move seems to directly contradict Biden's repeated promises to let the justice system operate independently. Now, critics are questioning whether the Democratic Party truly upholds the principles it claims to represent. Charlamagne took it a step further, arguing that the pardon undermines the party's long-held image as a champion of law and order, suggesting that Biden chose family loyalty over legal consistency. In doing so, he didn't just put his own credibility at risk. He also handed Republicans a potent narrative, questioning the Democratic Party's integrity. To many, the decision signals a troubling shift, prioritizing personal relationships over core values like equal justice and public trust in institutions. And for a party that leans heavily on moral messaging, these inconsistencies risk not only alienating swing voters, but also disillusioning members of its own base who expect transparency, consistency, and principled leadership.
And this is just my feeling, because at some point you get to the place where you just go, so I'm just going to follow the straight and narrow always, because that's what's expected of Democrats.
But that's their fault. They're the ones that go out there and they stand on this moral high ground.
Listen,
they don't have to do that.
I'm a Democrat. Tell me what the moral high ground is.
The moral high ground is nobody's above the law. I respect what the jurors are saying. He don't have to do that.
So we're mad at him because he changed his.
Oh, no. By the way, I'm not mad at him pardoning Hunter Biden.
But you sound like you're
mad.
No.
If I could get in on this, I actually think it went further, and this is one thing we really disagree on. Joe Biden made a point of saying we stand by our institutions
and the
impartiality of the Department of Justice.
Yes.
Democrats ran on that. This same DOJ indicted Hunter Biden. How we shouldn't be saying it's corrupt like Donald.
Charlamagne Tha God's sharp critique reflects a growing frustration with what many see as the Democratic Party's reliance on empty political slogans. He argues that Democrats often use phrases like, "No one is above the law," as partisan weapons mostly aimed at Republicans and Donald Trump while failing to hold themselves to the same standard. The recent pardon of Hunter Biden by President Joe Biden, Charlamagne says, is just the latest example of that double standard. To him, the move exposes a deep disconnect between the party's lofty rhetoric and its actual behavior, where core values are easily tossed aside when they become politically inconvenient. And the damage, he warns, is not just cosmetic, it's corrosive. It chips away at the party's credibility and drives disillusioned voters even further away. Charlamagne also singled out The View, particularly Whoopi Goldberg, for defending Biden's decision. He called her defense a clear case of blind partisanship. Goldberg's attempt to downplay or justify the pardon, he argued, wasn't about nuance, it was about refusing to hold those in power accountable, critics say. This kind of defense only deepens public mistrust in media figures who claim to speak truth to power but stay silent when their own side stumbles. For Charlamagne, that silence isn't neutrality, it's complicity. When loyalty to party outweighs commitment to accountability, the core democratic values of integrity, justice, and fairness risk being lost in the political noise.
That is why it is that when Joe Biden does something, everybody clutches their pearls. He's wrong.
Nobody
he lied.
has criticized Donald Trump more than me or Charlamagne Tha God.
I'm sorry. Yeah, people have criticized him more. I've criticized him more. We've all criticized him more. But you're missing my question.
Okay.
My question is, what is it that makes people flip out with Joe, but we don't have the same kind of thing?
Well, I don't think people are flipping out with Joe. I think Democrats are flipping out with Joe because Democrats believe that they don't represent what he's currently representing. But that's just not true. That's why I say they stand on this moral high ground that simply does not exist. And I think this is also the problem when we pick sides, right? We've turned political parties into teams. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. Ain't nobody more delusional than me, right? Okay? I feel like we're going to the Super Bowl every year, but I'm not delusional. Well, no, that is delusional. But when it comes, but when it comes to political parties, if you pick a side, right, if you say you're a Democrat, if you say you're a Republican, you refuse to be objective about anything.
I'm an independent.
Yes, but
I think that's the best way to go.
But that's not a monolith. We're not, Democrats are not a monolith.
But why can't you say when Democrats are wrong? And why can't Republicans say when Republicans are wrong?
I'll tell you when Democrats are
wrong. So you don't think Joe Biden is wrong?
No, I don't. And can I just point this out to you? The president has a pardon power,
you're ridiculous.
Right? I didn't say you were ridiculous, Ms. Goldberg. I would never. I said that. I just think that.
Charlamagne Tha God's critique strikes a chord with a broader frustration, building around the Democratic Party's behavior, one that many believe undermines the very democratic principles the party claims to uphold.